Hi, my name is Anna Victoria Wong. I'm a doctor in speech-language pathology and registered speech-language pathologist in Ontario, Canada. Thank you for taking time to watch this video today. I'm here to introduce the concept of how to serve a diverse clientele as an SLP. It is important for us to know not only for the fact that target clientele deserves the level of respect and cultural linguistic responsiveness from their allied health professionals, it is also for us as professionals to safeguard our license and best practices by complying with the cultural specific needs of our clients. In order to do that, we need to understand the services that we provide as a profession, and in turn, how each of these aspects of services that we provide will affect clients. Maybe for most of us, the first thing that comes to mind with diversity is speech. We're probably thinking about accent. Okay, so there is articulation for speech sound productions in diverse clienteles. There's also the service of accent reduction, and there is also fluency, which is also part of speech. The other bucket of service that we provide is language, in terms of language planning, reading, and writing. And then pragmatics is the third bucket that we can discuss in terms of social skills, sharing, demonstration of empathy, eye contact, interaction, initiation, joint attention, balanced participation, responsiveness, and also the level of social independence and the ability to seek help and advocate for oneself. The next bucket of services that we provide is voice treatment. Vocal pathology can result from vocal abuse, could be resulting from the occupation that the patient actually takes. And there is also the population of laryngectomies of post-cancer surgery patients. Another one yet is cognition. Memory, the ability to organize and plan, the ability to have insights and predictions, the ability to understand relationships and cause and effects. Last one is swallowing. It goes from cradle to grave. Neonatal feeding issues, dysphagia in adults, swallowing disorders, and swallowing safety for caregivers, diet consistencies, and prevention of aspiration pneumonia. All of these are the work of SLPs. Now, first off, we need to protect ourselves as a profession. There are actually laws that governs the level of respect one or actually any human being is entitled to. So from the Canadian Human Rights Act, here is a list of the grounds for discrimination: race, national origin or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or gender expression, marital status, family status, disability, genetic characteristics, pardoned or suspended conviction. Now, under the UN Convention and the US Charter of Rights, there are actually other ones that you can add on top of it. So please go back to reference your own local legislation regarding grounds for discrimination. By understanding the series of grounds of discrimination, we have a better benchmark to guard ourselves to or to conduct ourselves professionally in order to avoid or unknowingly discriminate others or exhibit behaviors or speech that others may perceive as discrimination. Now, how do all of these apply to service? Number one was speech in the first of the 6 buckets of SLPs. Diversity in speech manifests itself in accent, but also the underlying cause may be a difference in phonotactic patterns. So for some languages, they don't actually share the same phonotactic patterns as others, such as the V and the Z and the TH sounds in English is not universal in all languages. In East Asian languages, for example, they're not all there. In Chinese, there is no TH, voiced or voiceless. There's no V because of the voice. However, there is an F. In the Filipino language of Tagalog, there is no F and there is no V. So you may hear them manifest themselves to become P and B because it becomes a stop. Now, there are languages that are tonal versus atonal. English is moderately atonal, as in tones usually don't affect the meaning of the word itself. However, there are other languages where tones actually significantly alter the meaning of words. So we need to watch out when we are treating clients for speech. When they come from tonal languages, there are markers that would be marking themselves wrong in terms of articulation, not only because of the motor, but also because of the voice. Other than accents, there's also intralingual variations, such as in English. Even in standard American English, people articulate S's differently. There is the S that is dental alveolar. There is the tongue down S versus tongue up. There's also vernacular within any particular language, such as the African American English. Their vowels are very different from standard American English, and the vowels naturally are very different from received pronunciation in the United Kingdom. Diversity also happens in language. So in language, apart from reading and writing and language planning, we can actually break that down into very many smaller aspects of language. We can start with print orientation. To flip open an English book, you may open it from right to left. The cover opens from right to left. However, there are other languages where the book cover actually opens from left to right. So you would start the book the other way around. Also, there are alphabets or text direction that is different. English writes from left to right. There are languages that write from right to left, such as Hebrew. And there are languages that can exist in any left-right or right-left order, or vertical orders, such as Chinese. The letter case is also specific to certain languages. The fact that English has title case, uppercase, and lowercase in this alphabet does not mean that that case distinction exists in all other languages. Most East Asian languages, for example, do exist without cases, actually. And punctuation. Punctuation in English is usually mandatory. It is actually not the case in some other languages, such as in Chinese. You can have punctuation, but the more formal versions of Chinese, or the more archaic versions of Chinese, or when it's written in a poetic style, takes no punctuation. Tenses. Tenses manifest in English as morphemes themselves. Tenses actually may manifest in other non-Romance or non-Germanic languages as separate words. So their tense markers may not be a suffix or prefix, or it may not be a change of vowel within the word itself, but the marker exists as a separate word. So with an additional word appended to the end of the verb, that becomes a tense marker. Also, conditions in Romance and Germanic language exist very differently in other languages. In most East Asian languages, they simply exist in different words. So the sentence structure would be altered, but not exactly the word itself would be altered. There are also languages that have multiple alphabet systems. So English has the alphabet systems from A to Z. However, Japanese is a very good example. Japanese itself has 4 alphabet systems. So its most traditional and original alphabet system is hiragana. It is written usually in a serif font because it's shown as the brush stroke to show its traditional font face, to show that it is actually the traditional alphabet of hiragana. However, it also has loaned languages. So loaned language components exist in almost like a transcription way. But to show the transcription itself, it also developed the second alphabet system called katakana. And when it's actually listed together with the traditional alphabet system, katakana shows usually in a non-serif font. So when you see a one sentence with different font faces, it actually may not be a formatting error. It may actually be a way to show to the reader the different code switch that it is using. And the third one up is Romanji. this is for people who actually understands the English alphabet. So in order to say wasabi that we eat, Romanji shows it as the English alphabet of W-A-S-A-B-I. Right? And it also actually, in English, obviously, it means the word wasabi that we know. But the fact that we spell out wasabi is because it's actually Romanji in Japanese. And the other loaned language that Japanese adopts a lot is Chinese. Therefore, there is this kanji. Kanji actually literally translates into Chinese characters. Han Dynasty is where it originated from. So you would see very boxy characters with multiple brushstrokes, not exactly alike like the original alphabet systems of Japanese. It looks more like Chinese characters. That alphabet system is a loaned language, and it's called kanji. So in terms of print itself, it's already very varied across different languages and can be very varied within the language itself. There are some languages that also prints itself out using transcriptions. So sometimes you would, and it would actually be, it's actually more utilized nowadays than before, such as in social media or chat room languages. Sometimes people write out transcriptions instead of the actual word. So in English, people, you would portray it as sometimes people spell things differently because it's online language. For online languages in some other languages, they actually write out the transcription instead of the word. And for SLPs, our transcriptions means the IPA. But the IPA, as much as we think it is universal, it's actually not so universal. There are other language learners from their mother tongue, their transcriptions are very different. So for Mandarin learners, the way they learn their own language, that transcription sounds are actually a consonant vowel combo. So for the sound B, they actually transcribe it as B-O. So for a series of stops, instead of saying they transcribe it as B-O, bo, P-O, po, M-O, mo, and F-O, fo. So the transcription itself, the system is very different. And the other side of the world, Taiwanese Mandarin uses a very different transcription system. It is a separate alphabet system than itself. So within even the language of Chinese alone, there are different transcription systems. Also, there are dialects. So if you think Mandarin is the national language of the country of China, you would know that they have Fujianese, Shanghainese, Cantonese, and many other dialects. And some dialects, when their written and verbal systems are strong enough, are actually deemed languages instead of dialects in the Book of the United States. And those may vary, so I encourage you to go back to reference it the day of your research. There are countries where languages have strong foreign language influence. So in English, some examples would be, when you say foie gras or when you say clairvoyant, those are French foreign influences. The same actually happens in other languages too. So stamp is just as an English language influence in Chinese. It becomes sidam in Cantonese. And the English language influence in Japan, such as soup and coffee, becomes suppo and kohi. So it happens actually in a lot of other languages as well. They're just that their articulation patterns would be quite different, and their print patterns may differ as well. So we talked about Japanese, where they have different alphabet systems. Font faces actually play a role. Like I said before, for the Japanese to decipher between their original or traditional alphabet system, hiragana, with the foreign language influenced alphabet system, katakana, they use a serif font for the traditional one and a non-serif font for the foreign language one. Now, there are some languages where the print system is quite different, such as Chinese. In the past less than 100 years, the calligraphy or the orthographic system of simplified Chinese was developed. It was mainly developed after the Cultural Revolution. A Cultural Revolution was an era in history where a lot of schooling systems were transformed majorly, and there was a period where schooling was actually non-existent or very lagging behind. So having a simplified orthographic system makes it easier for people to learn. So traditional Chinese exists in places like Hong Kong and Taiwan, and simplified Chinese is used in the mainland China as well as Singapore. There is also diversity that manifests itself in pragmatics, and it is more than you think the Italian hand gestures. So pragmatics happen in eye contact, initiation, question and answer routine, and assumption of personal space, the level of a person's assertiveness, confirmation, and their way to express negation, to name a few. Diversity here actually manifests itself not only in terms of the races or the languages people use, but it's also in socio-economic power. It is also across gender, and there is a power differential. So you can think of it in a family system or in a society system where certain roles or certain genders or certain age, particular sectors of people have different eye contacts and level of initiation or role playing in question and answers. There are some very traditional cultures where in a social or corporate hierarchy, these so-called people that are the workers that are so-called lower down in the social hierarchy actually manifest less eye contact directly to their superiors, or in public spaces where they coexist with their superiors. So that is the cultural difference. And also, you may as SLPs or teachers, notice that the level of initiation, help-seeking behavior, and question and answer behaviors are quite different from certain ethnic groups in your student population. And that could be because of the home country where they came from. You know, students in certain countries are actually taught to be very studious, obedient student, and they're more accustomed to the style of the sage on stage, I listen and I go home and do homework type style. So that's not a right or wrong, that's just a cultural behavior differences. So you would see that eye contact, initiation, help-seeking behavior, and Q&As may be showing up less in certain ethnic populations, and that may not be a red flag. In terms of, reduced pragmatic behaviors and therefore, learning disabilities or ASDs, those may actually not be red flags. That actually may be a result of their cultural differences. Also, in different SES contexts or power differential contexts, the level of assertiveness, the ability for someone to confirm themselves or negate someone else may be different. Even within the same culture, the same race, and the same age group, people in the office space may have different levels of assertiveness and different ability to say no. It could be a matter of personality. It could also be a matter of corporate culture. It could also be a result of power differential. Facial expressions, hand gestures, and head gestures may be different because of that person's personality, or it may also be a result of cultural differences. Some cultures exhibit a lot more expressions that are physical, some cultures less so. And tonal responses or verbal acknowledgement. Some cultures exhibit more systemic and routine, automatic and reflexive verbal acknowledgement, such as when someone is going on a tangent like I am now, they would and nod a lot more. But there are some cultures that would typically remain silent until you finish, and they raise their hands to get their turns to speak. And this actually happens in churches too. In different congregations, you would see the congregation saying amen to the sermon a lot. Whereas in the same church, but with different populations, actually the crowd would actually stay silent until it is their role to speak up. So all of these also, apart from power differentials, social settings, they also, pragmatic differences also exhibit in the differences of gender. So there are some cultures where, in more extreme cases, women are not allowed to share the dining table with the rest of the family, where they need to be in the kitchen, right? That's not for all cultures, and it's not for the entire culture. Let's say, name one, and because I'm of Chinese descent, I guess I can say that. There are in certain dialectal populations of China where the level of chauvinism is very different. I've heard of cases, and I actually have family members myself who came from that culture where the mom was actually not able to share the dining table with the rest of the family. So naturally, their speech patterns would be very different. Their pragmatic patterns would be very different. And there are also cases where there are domestic helpers in the house, and they are not allowed, so to speak, to share the dining space together with the family, and they would be eating in a different room. So naturally, the social, linguistic, and behavioral differences would be pretty noticeable. So that goes with peer dynamics. It could be within the same race, it could be within the same age group and same setting, but there are naturally some personalities that are more dominating, some personalities that are more vocal, and there are some that are more reserved. Therefore, the peer dynamics also play a role in the diversity and in pragmatics. And that goes to the follower-leader differential. It may be the workplace where the boss talks a lot and the crowd remains silent and never asks a question until one day something blows up. Or it could be just a matter of siblings, because of a more dominant sibling and a slower developed one, and therefore there is a follower-leader differential or an interdependency in terms of a pragmatic behavior between the two, or it just could be a matter of personality differences. So in a lot of these cases, these are unwritten rules made more complex by the social environmental settings that they're in. And for those differences in behaviors, we as SLPs need to notice the differences and respect that in certain contexts there is a reason for the differences in behavior, and not to be labeling as quickly or assuming that those are deficiencies in behaviors or pragmatic abilities.